Now we start in Europe, where US and Chinese officials meet in Madrid to discuss ongoing trade tensions, including a looming deadline for Chinese-owned TikTok to divest its US operations. This is the fourth round of talks in 4 months aimed at preventing further collapse in the strained US-China trade relationship under President Trump's tariffs. While no major breakthroughs are expected, an extension of the TikTok divestiture deadline is likely. Talks also cover Washington's push for G7 and European allies to impose tariffs on China to curb its purchases of Russian oil, part of efforts to cut funding to Moscow amid the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Spain hosts the talks as part of its efforts to position Madrid as a key venue for high-level diplomatic negotiations. Both sides aim to lay groundwork for potential future talks between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, focusing on trade, national security and regional stability. Okay, we are now joined by Andrew Latham. He is a professor of international relations and he joins us live from Minnesota. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us. Pleasure to talk to you as always. Andrew, how significant are these Madrid talks in the grand scheme of things and in the broader trajectory of US-China relations under Trump's tariffs? Experts have warned that there might not be any significant outcome from these talks. However, a TikTok extension deadline is likely. What are your thoughts on these talks in the Spanish capital?
Well, I think in the short term, the impact is likely to be minimal. We'll see a few symbolic adjustments to tariffs, I think. We'll see an extension on the TikTok deadline. That's in President Trump's domestic political interests. And there might be a few other, at the margins, a few other largely symbolic moves. In the medium term, short to medium term, I think it's important in that it sets up future meetings of heads of state. So Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping will probably get together at the upcoming APEC summit. That's a hope anyway. And if not in that forum, then in some other forum. In the longer term, there's only one way to read this, which is not as an opportunity for massive breakthroughs, but as a modality for managing great power competition between China and the United States. There are frictions, and there are tensions that go beyond frictions between these two great powers, regionally and globally, trade and geopolitics. And they have to find ways of managing this. Otherwise, it threatens to spiral out of control with predictable and lamentable consequences. So I think if we see this as yet another instance of these two great powers coming together to mitigate and minimize these tensions, I think that's the best way to see it. The only other thing that might emerge out of this, and I doubt it very strongly, is some agreement on purchasing oil. This resonates in India as well, purchasing Russian oil. And again, I think the differences here are just too wide. I don't think China is going to accede to American demands / requests, but I think the United States will make those demands and requests. And it will make them in Madrid, and it will make them at the upcoming APEC summit as well, because that's in America's best interest. China's best interest is to resist American pressure on that particular issue. So no breakthroughs, but a good sign in terms of the big picture, managing great power competition.
Yes, Andrew, and how do trade, national security and regional stability intersect at this moment? And which of these is likely to dominate a possible Xi-Trump meet if it does indeed happen?
Well, I think if that does happen, the intersection of geoeconomics and geopolitics, if I can put it that way, certainly around the Russian oil issue. The Trump administration is keen now, at this moment anyway, on upping the pressure on President Putin and cutting off what they perceive to be one of the sources of its revenue to support this war. And China, of course, has very little interest in that it both wants inexpensive Russian oil, but also doesn't want the United States dictating these sorts of things. So that's one area. Another, which sometimes is below the radar, is IT, information technology issues, chip manufacturing and things like that. China wants the U.S. to relax some of its restraints on American exports to China of cutting-edge technologies. And the United States, of course, doesn't want all of its supply chains to be relocated to a potentially hostile power. So there's some geoeconomics, geopolitics intersecting there as well. The TikTok thing gets a lot of airtime, and justifiably. I've got two kids who spend a lot of time on TikTok. The security concerns are valid and justified, I think. But the Trump administration has little interest, I think. First of all, it doesn't want to alienate a constituency, youth in this country, which it was at one point in the recent past, turning towards the Republican Party. But there are serious security concerns attached to TikTok. So that's, again, there's a domestic politics, there's a geopolitics, and there's a geoeconomics angle to this because it's a big generator of revenue for everybody. So those are some of the big issue areas where those two fields intersect and overlap.
Yes, Andrew Latham, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Always a pleasure to get your analysis on these matters. We now move on and over to the Indo-Pacific, where according